Vagabond is quickly skyrocketing into my manga hall of fame, with symbolism and rich meaning coating the pages the story told through the first two arcs of the series. Musashi's two encounters with Inshun of Hosoin particularly stuck out to me whilst reading. I couldn't put the book down from the moment their first fight began until their second fight ended. The Hosoin arc itself is set into three main portions, so let's talk about it, starting with fear. Fear is a complex emotion to display at times. A character can show fear by crying, being unable to do a task, or completely shutting down. In Musashi's case, I believe Inoue handles it in a much more nuanced manner. Fear is the most important aspect of what makes this fight interesting. It's explored expertly. In their first encounter, Musashi is overcome with an intense feeling of inadequacy and, as I just mentioned, fear. This isn't just represented in the dialogue, but it's built up throughout the entire fight, through imagery and most importantly, an uncharacteristic retreat to round out the fight. Fear is represented as a looming monster with bright eyes hiding in the darkness, with the text saying that Musashi knows only too well how the demon fear can make even the mightiest of men fall. We see this taking over Musashi through dark panels with copious amounts of hatching and sweat dripping down Musashi's face. The reason this is so effective is because it is in stark contrast to the incredibly clean design of Inshun. As a bald man with a jovial smile a lot of the time, he's shown to be a lot more calm and an exact counter to what Musashi is experiencing. For a lot of the fight, he is largely enjoying it, with panels featuring him having white backgrounds and limited hatching, whereas the ones with Musashi are coated in darkness. As well as this, panels featuring Inshun are broad, with a lot of the background being visible, his world completely open, whereas panels featuring Musashi are claustrophobic, smaller, and take up less of the page overall. Another aspect of this opening stage of the fight that makes Musashi's emotions ever more apparent is Gion Toji, who arrives at the same time as Musashi with the original intent to fight him. However, once Inshun gets involved, he takes a back seat as an onlooker, being able to see Musashi's emotions unfold and see where he is going wrong in the fight. Despite what he says to Musashi, Musashi cannot put it into action. This sense of Musashi not being able to actually match Inshun is what leads to the eventual defeat feeling natural and organic. There are no power-ups or aspals, it is purely fact of the matter, Musashi is not strong enough yet, which the child that was accompanying him, Jotaro, notices, and he decides to abandon Musashi because of it. Following the defeat, Musashi's growth is actually shown in an even more realistic way. The character on display here shows so many different relatabilities that it's incredibly hard to not care or feel for Musashi. The final page of Volume 6 shows Musashi awaiting Inshun's advances, with a confident look on his face. Though, whilst in that moment he did show confidence, very quickly he begins overthinking, his mind and actions racing to conclusions. This takes the form of inner monologue and his rushed attempt at a sneak attack to just get the fight started and over with, in doing this surrendering himself to the fact that he could die that night. Though there are a number of things that happen before this. The character that spearheads Musashi's growth is Hosoin Inie, Inshun's former master, who takes Musashi on and begins training him. They go through a number of different training exercises, with Musashi having to bear the brunt of a waterfall and live in the mountains, as Inie decrees that the mountains are the only teacher that Musashi has ever had, and this is where he will find his answer. This whole time we see Musashi's thoughts as well, thinking to himself how he became such a coward. Constantly envisioning himself running away again and again, realizing in himself that he is scared, he's scared of Inshun, and he can't figure out a way right now to beat him. After living in the mountains and ridding himself of all distractions through the use of the waterfall, he comes to the conclusion that to beat Inshun, he needs to know more about him, to envision him as more of a human and not some insurmountable force to be reckoned with. Not viewing the prior fight as a loss, and instead deeming it as just another step towards victory. It's at this point in Musashi's thought process that Takuan's words from him earlier resonate with him. He thinks back on it, preoccupied with a single leaf, you won't see the tree. Preoccupied with a single tree, you'll miss the entire forest. This colouring Musashi's whole thought process, in how he became conceited in viewing Inshun as just a single leaf, with this leaf being that he's strong, and nothing else. Instead, there is a whole other person behind that strength, and it's this that Musashi wants to conquer. Shooting forward again, we get to the night of the fight, where Musashi attempts to stage a surprise attack, which eventually leaves him feeling exhausted and, in turn, oversleeping, leaving Inshun waiting. Though, after thinking of his youth and Otsu and what's driving him to this point, he realises that he's nothing. If he's destined to die, then that's alright too. Inshun of Hosoin is the strongest opponent I've ever encountered. Not bad for what could be my final fight. Yes, I'm blessed. This fight is largely atypical for anime and manga, as despite the fact that it spans almost 2 volumes, the fight is decided in almost 3 moves, with a lot of the fight coming down to the two sizing each other up. It's almost reminiscent of the final fight between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Maul in Star Wars Rebels, which is a reference I never thought I'd be making. But the reason that this fight is so different to the prior one is because of Musashi's development, and how this development plays on Inshun's mind state. The panelling also shows Musashi as being really big, taking up a lot of the space, as this is how Inshun is seeing him. Before, Musashi didn't bear much of a threat to Inshun at all, but now, he's too cautious to even make a move. And on Musashi's half, he finally sees Inshun as just a human, taking in the surroundings and realising that the two of them are both really small in the grand scheme of things, in a really beautiful spread. Throughout this fight as well, we get flashbacks to Inie's past, how he met his master and what he taught him. Alongside Inie, we also see a younger Munayoshi, who both learn from their master that the way of the sword is not something to be taken so trivial, and that his sword is one with heaven and earth, in an incredibly beautiful spread, seeing that you don't even need to fully depend on your sword, which, having this flashback at this time in the series, contextualizes the fight they're having, making a simple standoff much more rich and meaningful. Musashi identifies Inshun's need and want for mortal combat, saying that this time, his life's on the line. Once the two finally do trade blows, Inshun is the first to make an attack, grazing Musashi's right cheek and ear, though leaving himself wide open for Musashi to land a clean hit on Inshun's face. He drops to the ground and Musashi repeatedly beats him, letting out all of the pent-up stress and rage that had built up. Though what happens afterwards is a much more somber stretch of chapters, as Inshun's soul leaves his body. We learn through a beautiful stretch of chapters Inshun's past, being taken in by Inie and the unfortunate death of his parents. It was at this point that he was actually called Shinosuke. Inshun was a name given to him by Inie, and the way that Inoue shows fear, horror, and realization on Inshun's face is just masterful. And in these dying moments of Inshun, he's truly humanized. I thought I was striving to become stronger, but I was only covering things up with sand. He finally realizes where he was going wrong in life, with this act of mortal combat fully realizing himself, though only too late. As he gets closer and closer to death, he's filled with just one thought: I want to live. As rain begins to fall, it appears that Inshun's soul shattered. But suddenly, Musashi begins panicking. I won, right? His heart begins racing as, in the shadows of the now extinguished fire, Inshun stands again. I can't believe you're still standing, Musashi. You've lost so much blood. Heavy. My body feels so heavy. Inshun falls to the ground again along with Musashi, both exhausted. And it's this win that results in it being chucked down to a draw, with Inie refusing to record it in the temple's records. And with Musashi growing in strength, Inshun also gains something. As he looks out across the fields, he realizes that he isn't alone, a single tear falling down his cheek. As Musashi takes off, Inshun says, next time, let's try not to kill each other. Musashi gives him a smile and proceeds on his journey. With that, the two men have both grown substantially from their encounters with each other. And again, I don't think this would have been as hard-hitting or as effective if Inoue didn't know exactly what he was doing. The art style throughout these chapters makes it feel like you're reading something special, which you are. The character writing and the depth created because of this is so poignant. And as I said, Vagabond is quickly skyrocketing into my manga hall of fame. And so, with that, I hope to see you next time.